Super Random Japan. Nani?
Many people have been hearing all the news of tourists who are ruining Japan and that Japan is finally fighting back, causing many would-be tourists to question what is and isn't okay. From walls being erected to cover photogenic spots to banning open alcoholic beverages in public, and photography and streaming video being banned in many establishments, to some establishments even becoming off-limits altogether, one of the politest and coolest nations in the world has finally begun cracking down on tourism and social media. And rumors and overreactions aren't helping. I'm going to shed some light on how this has come to be, and not just since COVID isolation ended like many others are discussing, though I'll expand upon that as well. You see, this is a trend that began decades ago, and you could even probably trace the trend back to the decades following World War II. Unlike most countries after a major war, Japan was quick to admit defeat and work hard to get back on their feet as fast as possible, in all their humble nature, including working with their previous enemies and the rest of the world. The country banded together like no other country, rebuilt, and in less than 20 years after the war, Tokyo was hosting the Olympic Games in 1964. This was also the era the Shinkansen, or bullet train, was invented, Tokyo Tower was erected, and many venues were constructed for the sake of the games. Thanks to the games, and international flights in general becoming more normal as well, more and more people took up interest in this exotic new land. Well, exotic from their perspective. Tourists quickly began to see the unique blend of the newest modernity intertwined with ancient traditions and heritage sites. Hollywood also began to take notice leading up to and after the games, and the rest of the world would start seeing some of the allure within its productions. While being fairly racist at times, of course. Hollywood continued making movies to inspire Western audiences, and Japanese filmmakers would return the favor, like Akira Kurosawa, whom would inspire Western filmmakers like George Lucas. And though Japan in the 1970s wasn't that flooded with tourists, we then entered the 1980s. Known as the Bubble Era in Japan due to its huge economic wealth, which would later burst, it was also the era that introduced the West to films such as Karate Kid and TV series such as Shogun. Add to that the rise of VHS and countless ninja videos, and soon every kid wanted to travel to the motherland and learn from the ancient masters or whatever. In fact, I think almost all of the only ninjas left in Japan are old middle-aged white guys who moved there in the 80s and 90s thinking they were being unique. In addition to martial arts, you of course had the video games, TV, and virtually all cool technology coming from Japan during that era. Then, in the 90s, all the coolest new cars were coming out, being economical but heavily modifiable. Now, kids with their hand-me-down economy cars could not only compete with their dad's old muscle cars, but could access a slew of custom parts, and let's face it, giving a kid the ability to customize something is not only the ultimate illusion of uniqueness for them, but customization never leads to anything odd or distasteful. But I digress. It was an era of cars that have inspired YouTubers, car enthusiasts, and general people to this day, especially due to video games like PlayStation's Gran Turismo, and anime series such as Initial D and Wangan Midnight. And speaking of the 80s and 90s, let's address the elephant in the room. Anime, or Japanese animation, was becoming more and more popular worldwide, reaching its climax going into the 2000s and beyond. I remember when I started taking Japanese at the beginning of the century, there was only one class of just about a dozen or people so, and almost all of us were business or foreign studies majors. In my second year, however, there were 3 full classes with 30 people in each, and most were otaku, or anime nerds, and it only escalated from there. As the 2000s went on, file-sharing programs, BitTorrents, then streaming, and so on helped raise the popularity of anime as well as obscure Japanese music, films, and cultural phenomena, like panty vending machines, etc. Japan was becoming a mecca for many and a beautiful and fascinating destination for others. Globalization was rising and tourism grew and grew. Those years included my time there, and I may admit I may have taken advantage of the system like many others, which I'll explain soon. Then, of course, came the COVID pandemic in 2019. Borders shut, and a world of would-be tourists sat locked in isolation. As nations began to open their borders and new generations of Japanese culture nuts came out of their shells, Japan was quickly on top of many people's travel lists. However, in addition to a desperation to get out and travel, came another new trend. Streamers, and a huge rise in social media. Added to this is an interesting multiplier of a problem and something that I've been leaving out of this explanation, and that is greed and vanity, and essentially the need to show off in general. In previous videos I made, especially in that of my video about Charisma Man, I make mention of some of the joys of being a foreigner in Japan and the inherent confidence and comfort it gives people when visiting or even living there, mostly due to the fact that Japanese people are so polite and attentive and strive to provide the best service experience one can expect. This ends up making tourists not only feel like royalty, but assume they can do anything they want since not many Japanese people will complain and even police are respectful. It leads tourists to assume they're guests in their own personal amusement park, as I've also discussed on this channel. Social media has merely exacerbated Japan's tourism problem, most notably with nuisance streamers. One of my first viral videos was about the nuisance streamer Johnny Somali and his arrest in Japan for his ridiculous antics. For details on that, please watch the previous videos since I no longer want to talk about that loser. For extra spicy content, I also document my arrest and deportation from Japan, so there is clearly a limit to Japan's toleration, though my problem wasn't as a nuisance, but as a greedy fool. As I said, I was part of the problem, and I regrettably have to admit that. Anyway, nuisance streamers and the such have also caused many establishments to ban photographing and recording videos. It's not just the nuisance streamers causing problems though. Normal photographers and streamers are causing large migrations which become a different kind of nuisance to local areas. Viral photos and videos on social media have caused people to flock to otherwise quiet areas and causing overcrowding, littering, and other problems. Thanks to one viral photo on social media, for example, a Lawson convenience store in Fujikawaguchi-ko in Yamanashi Prefecture has become a popular place to get an image of Mount Fuji sitting on a convenience store roof. I know. Cool, right? As an effort to stop swarms of people attempting to recreate this quirky photo op, the town erected a black wall, and though it slowed traffic quite a bit, many people still poked holes and snuck pics. But I honestly think people just realized it's a pretty lame and short-lived idea and stopped coming in waves on their own accord. It's not just nuisance streamers and influencers that are being nuisances either. Aside from your typical loud tourists on the train and so forth, one of the bigger problems is people vandalizing sacred places or even sacred people. The Maiko, or geisha in training, differentiated from their seniors by their pure white makeup, furisode, bell shoes, and natural hair, have long been a unique symbol of Japan. They dedicate their lives to maintaining some of the oldest traditions still being practiced, from cultural song and dance, attire, and entertainment in general. They are a dying breed, especially the young Maiko. Most schoolgirls aren't excited about dedicating their lives to being private entertainers, usually for rich old businessmen. So, for strangers to constantly bother them, touch them, and try to get photos with them, it can be even more off-putting, like they're some kind of zoo animal. Due to the unwanted attention, some streets in the Gion district of Kyoto, the hub of geisha culture, have begun banning non-residents from entering certain streets and areas as they're privately owned anyway. Now the Maiko just need to dodge people on public streets. Kinda hard with those kimonos wrapped tightly around those legs, a reason many Japanese girls and women walk or run bow-legged I assume, but an emphasis on the assume. Anyway, let's continue. The final situation I'll talk about that tourists are affecting is one of the more recent, and that is the problem with drinking in public places, something that I enjoyed the freedom of in Japan when I was living and traveling there. As a teacher, we would often get station beers, as we called them, after work, in which everyone would get a drink from the convenience store at or near the train station and hang out for a bit before heading our different ways. Or we'd have drinking parties in the parks or whatever. Naturally, the ability to drink almost anywhere, anytime has been an allure of tourists to Japan as well. Shibuya and Shinjuku have long been some of the biggest, if not the biggest, tourist spots in Japan. Aside from the Shibuya Scramble crosswalk being in virtually every film and TV show about Japan, it also is one of the biggest shopping and entertainment areas, offering a multitude of international stores, brands, unique foods, nightclubs, etc., and it virtually never sleeps. Due to this, however, and Japan's allowance of drinking in public places, things have gotten out of hand over the years as tourism booms. The problem used to mostly occur the worst on Halloween, prompting the area to start banning public drinking only then this past year, naturally not being overly effective. However, now Shibuya is going to start banning public drinking all year round. Shinjuku is also going to start policing public drinking after 6 p.m. And before I go on, let me comfort anyone by telling them they'll likely just be told to move along or throw away any beverages. You will not be arrested for being drunk after 6 or carrying an open container unless you're being a major problem. Also, don't be afraid or offended if police ask for an ID or anything. It's a normal occurrence to make sure you're not there illegally. You're not being arrested or deported. Again, this is advice from someone who was deported. Whatever happens, just apologize and do whatever they say, and your night will go on without a problem. Overall, I don't think this will have an effect either, since people will just move the party down the street, so to speak. I predict new hot spots like Ikebukuro will be next, along with Shibuya's neighbor Harajuku and so forth, and going around the rest of the Yamanote Railroad line, the central line around Tokyo, and then branching out further and further until the whole country has no choice but to ban public drinking everywhere. This is sad because, again, it's a problem not caused by Japanese citizens, but people who are on vacation and wanting to party, taking advantage of the country's rules, or lack thereof. Even foreigners living in Japan and Japanese citizens wanting to party may partake from time to time, but for the most part, those who are permanent residents will more often than not abide by the rules, aside from a couple nights a year. Even then, they try to remain tolerable drunks. Japanese citizens especially are often quite polite, even when drunk. They're usually just happy and friendly drunks since most of the day they're so bottled up, polite, and private, whereas many countries, especially in the West, are usually outspoken, so when drinking they're extra outspoken. At those times it's all about sex and violence since those are the only things that we try to keep a bit tame during the normal day. I remember I encountered an angry drunk Japanese man once, a rarity, trying to pick a fight with everyone on the train. Of course the sober Japanese people politely avoided conflict. When the man bumped into me, he turned around angry, but once he saw I was a foreigner, he apologized, as if it was built into his subconscious. Then, he turned around again and was about to go back to being angry, but he must have realized I might not have understood his apology, and so he turned back around again to say in broken English, "I'm sorry." Then, he went back to yelling at everyone else. Sure, my typical American pride made my first reaction to assume it was because he realized I'm bigger and could kick his butt, but then I realized the small man probably would have kicked my ass. Because, all Asians know martial arts. Did I mention Americans can be racist? I joke, but you get my point. At the end of the day, most of the problems in Japan are stemming from tourists, and the more everyone shares on social media that there's one big party going on in the amusement park that is Japan, the worse things will get. That is, at least until there's another ultra-polite, clean, safe, interesting, and fun country that people discover that they can fuck around and not find out, so to speak. Still, I think this is something that's been going on for a long time, and like many underlying problems, social media has opened the world's eyes to it. However, since it has been going on for a long time, I don't think it's something Japanese people or those planning to visit Japan should worry about. Annoying tourists are an inevitability, and eventually everyone finds a balance, or at least I'd like to think that's the case. Sure, places throughout the world like Venice, etc. have become overrun by tourists over time, but that's mostly because of historical destinations everyone wants to visit. Japan's tourism problem is only a little about historical allure, and more about the general lax rules and politeness of the people, and cool things to do and see there. As people start pushing back, and as globalization blends cultures, I think most of the hype and worry will die down, and Japan will again just be a cool place to visit with just a few bad apples. So let me know what you think about the situation. I know this thing kind of happens worldwide, in which an open culture ends up falling victim to tourism. After all, many cities, islands, countries, etc. get overwhelmed and eventually taken over to the extent there's almost no local culture left and it's just a land of tourism. I don't see that happening anytime soon for Japan, but it is an inevitable fact that globalization is here to stay and the only constant in life is change. If you're interested in more Japanese news, culture, reviews, and other random topics about Japan, please like, subscribe, and all that mumbo jumbo. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll hopefully talk to you soon. Later.